In the third year of marriage, Ethan fell in love with a female college student, and the two fell in love vigorously. I continued to play the role of a gentle and sensible rich wife, and even considerately helped him cover up in front of both parents. Until he went to the club to look for his disobedient little girl, he saw me sitting on the male model's lap, hugging her and biting her. The man who had always been noble had red eyes and smashed the club to pieces. Chapter 1. Ethan's mistress has been a little restless lately. She actually went to the old house secretly without Ethan's knowledge, hoping that the old man would recognize her identity. The old man was furious. I played a trick with Ethan and brought her out safely. The little bitch followed us with red eyes. As soon as she walked out of the carved door of the old house, she immediately reached out and grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Brother, I'm not with you for money." She looked up at Ethan Chen, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked so pitiful, no wonder Ethan was so obsessed with her. Apparently, the attitude of the old man and Ethan's parents made her realize how big the gap between her and the Chen family was, so she couldn't wait to explain as soon as she came out. Vivian frowned, but she couldn't bear to blame him. He reached out and rubbed her head, his tone half helpless and half doting. "Okay, don't cry, I know everything." After saying that, he looked at me standing beside him, with a somewhat embarrassed look. "She must have been scared just now, I will take her back first." "You?" "I came here with him in his car, and now he wants to send his new love, so I naturally can't go with him. But if I let the driver of the old house send me, the old man will definitely know about it." I smiled at him Vivian and took the initiative to take over the conversation. "I'll just take a taxi later." Ethan was obviously very satisfied with my understanding. He nodded, hugged the little bitch, and left without looking back. He didn't even remember that within a few kilometers around the old house, the land was very expensive, and those who lived here were either rich or noble. You can't get a taxi at all. Chapter 2. Ethan didn't come home until the evening of the next day, and there were still a few strawberry marks on his neck that had faded. They were deliberately printed in places that couldn't be covered by the collar, as if to declare ownership. This childish trick could only be done by a child without deep thoughts. I lowered my eyes, pretending not to see anything, and took over the coat he had just taken off with a smile, showing my virtue to the fullest. I even generously expressed my concern for his mistress. "How is she?" He tore at his collar a few times, and said in a relaxed tone, "She's just throwing a tantrum, and it will be fine if you coax her." It seems that he coaxed her. I hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to tell him the idea I had considered for a long time. "Have you ever thought about giving her a name?" Ethan's tall body froze in place, and after a few seconds he reacted and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ethan, let's get a divorce. I don't want to continue pretending to be a good wife for so long." Chapter 3. Obviously, Ethan never thought that I would ask for a divorce from him. He raised his hand and pinched his eyebrows a few times. The handsome face that had made me crazy for many years was full of restlessness. "Vivian, you should be very." You can hear that he has tried his best to suppress it and make his voice sound calm. In the past, his attitude meant that he didn't want to continue this topic. I should stop, but this time I am determined to get a divorce. Ethan and I are a business marriage. Divorce is not only a matter between the two of us, but also a matter between two families. It is indeed not easy to get a divorce. I bit my lip and continued, "It is a bit troublesome, but..." "Enough." He interrupted my next words rudely, stretched out his long arms, and pulled me into his arms. "I have indeed neglected you during this period. I will change in the future. Don't talk about divorce anymore. Vivian, it seems that we haven't had sex for a long time." After that, he lowered his head, and Vivian's pouting lips moved closer to me. I quickly covered his mouth with my hand and said something nonsense. "I'm on my period. It's inconvenient." "Fuck. Who cares about your rotten cucumber?" Chapter 4. The divorce talks fell through, and I quickly packed my bags and moved out of my house. Ethan thought I was jealous and petty, so he called me many times, and if I didn't answer, he would bombard me with messages. In fact, I was just worried that he would be horny again. As for jealousy, I admit that when we first got married, I felt very uncomfortable when he had some gossip, but later on, it happened more and more, and I gradually got used to it. My love for him was also exhausted in the habit again and again. However, I didn't mind him misunderstanding me, and I could take this opportunity to swipe his card as much as possible, just as compensation for his betrayal of my marriage. Chapter 5. A week after running away from home, my best friend Sienna and I stepped into the most high-end leisure club in the house. Of course, Ethan paid for all expenses. As soon as I entered, I met the mistress in work clothes and holding a fruit plate. Forget it, I couldn't remember her name after thinking for a long time. I coughed lightly and asked, "Why are you here?" Xiao San pursed her lips tightly, staring at me with her beautiful big eyes, looking angry. Sienna took my hand and looked her up and down. "Is this the bitch that your Ethan kept outside? Why, doesn't Ethan pay her? Why did he let her come here to work?" Xiao San's plate Vivian shook like a cat with its fur blown up. Ethan and I are together because we love each other, not for his money. She pointed the finger at me and continued to output, Ethan said that he only loves me, and he is with you just for the family's interests. I waved my hand, I know, then I wish you happiness. Chapter 6. I ignored her and took Sienna into the box. Sienna laughed so hard that her body shook. Where did Ethan find this bitch? She actually fell in love with a married man of Ethan's class. She didn't think that she could succeed in getting promoted like that, did she? She might as well make more money while she's still young. I raised the corner of my mouth, why not say you're young? Old money families like ours pay more attention to inheritance than wealth, so they are particularly cautious about marriage. The marriage partner is either very good and has a very high social status, or it's a marriage of convenience. Ethan is not stupid enough to give up everything he has for her, otherwise he would not disagree with the divorce I proposed. Sienna continued, I heard that this bitch is making trouble with Ethan these 2 days. It seems that because you ran away from home and took away most of Ethan's energy, the bitch is not happy. The circle is so small, if someone is interested in finding out, it's naturally impossible to hide it. I rolled my eyes at her, you are quite gossipy. Chapter 7. I have to say, it is really cool to use the money of my cheating husband to support a male model, especially if the male model is good-looking, sweet-mouthed and has a good body. It would be even better if my husband didn't catch him. When Ethan kicked the door open, I was sitting astride the male model I had picked up in the past 2 days, hugging his neck and biting his face. The seductive makeup, the charming big waves, and the hot girl outfit that especially highlights the figure. Hearing the sound, I instinctively looked towards the source of the sound. Before the seductive look in my eyes faded, I saw Ethan with a sinister face. What's there to be afraid of? You play yours, I play mine. Ethan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and the male model's eyes were so fierce that he seemed to want to cut him into pieces. I stroked my hair and broke the silence first. Why are you here? He gritted his teeth and spoke slowly and lowly. Vivian, how dare you? What's there to be afraid of? You play yours, I play mine. I felt more and more guilty, people should be fair. I didn't make a fuss with you when you had a mistress outside. I felt guilty not because I was caught whoring with a male model, but simply because I cheated on him and spent his money. Chapter 8. Mr. Ethan, why are you here? I've been looking for you in the VIP room for a long time. I brought Maya to you. I'm so sorry, I didn't know she was yours. I leaned over to look outside, and a chubby man came over with his mistress. It turned out to be Maya. Ethan stood there, not even glancing over there, but Maya, like a young swallow in the forest, threw herself on him with her arms outstretched and crying, Husband, I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so mad at you, and I shouldn't have run out to work without telling you. After shouting, she followed Ethan's gaze and saw me. She pursed her lips and shrank into Ethan's arms, and whispered coquettishly, Husband. The mistress called me husband in front of me, the original wife. This should be considered a blatant provocation, right? I don't care. At most, I feel a little disgusted, but it's hard for the fat man who has walked up to me. Although I don't know him, he seems to have recognized me. He looked at me, then at the male model next to me who was obviously ravaged, and finally at the sullen Ethan and the mistress in his arms. In just 1 minute, his facial expressions changed more than 10 times. In a family of corporate marriage, it is normal for the husband and wife to play with each other. As long as they don't make too much trouble, they will choose not to interfere with each other and whitewash the piece for the sake of interests. It is basically rare for us to have a Shura scene where we are confronting each other face to face. Chapter 9. Ethan patted Maya on the back and coaxed her with his temper. Be good, let the driver take you back first, I have something to deal with here. Maya said, oh, in a soft voice and slowly withdrew from Ethan's arms. She looked at me and said casually, are you talking about Miss Vivian's matter? When I first came to work a few days ago, I met Miss Vivian and her friends. I heard that they ordered 5 of the most expensive ones that day. I was afraid that you would quarrel, so I didn't dare to tell you. I sighed lightly, the little girl is not kind. Ethan's hands hanging by his side clenched into fists, and his eyes moved to Maya. His eyes were filled with suppressed impatience before anger. I asked you to go back first, don't you understand? Maya may have never been treated with this attitude by him, and she stared at him with a flat mouth, tears about to fall, as if she was unhappy. You hurry up and coax me. However, Ethan was in no mood to play the emotional game with her. For the first time, he got angry at the canary in his hand and said, get lost. Chapter 10. Maya ran away crying, and Ethan walked to the sofa where I had just ridden the male model with a sullen face and sat down on it. Manager Chen, please bring all the things my wife has ordered. He gritted his teeth and didn't say the word male model in the end. The fat man called Manager Chen wiped his sweat, bent over and nodded. As soon as he left, Ethan slammed the crystal glass on the table. Vivian, you have become more capable. He took off his suit jacket and threw it to me. The loose clothes covered my head, and I could still smell the perfume left by Maya on it. I pulled it off and wanted to throw it back to him. I saw him frowning and looking around at me, and finally his eyes were fixed on the two big white legs under the miniskirt. Put it on. Don't go out like this in the future. Chapter 11. He's really nosy. Why didn't I realize that he was so possessive before? I calmly put away my clothes and looked him in the eye. Ethan, let's get a divorce. I'm really tired of it. Ethan, who had been restraining himself, completely exploded after I said this. His eyes were red, and he kicked the table in front of him. Have I ever said that you are not allowed to mention these two words again in the future? I sighed and tried to communicate with him calmly. You don't love me, why do you have to tie me up? This way, none of us three are happy. Ethan was stunned for a moment, pointing at the male model who was standing next to him and was very quiet, and his voice was hoarse as if it had been rubbed by sandpaper. Unhappy? Are you happy to be with this kind of thing that is not up to the table? The male model raised his eyebrows and retorted, don't you know whether you are happy or not? Think about when you were with that thing that is not up to the table that you raised. I quietly gave him a thumbs up. A warrior. Chapter 12. When Manager Chen led a row of male models in, Ethan had already smashed the box to pieces. The flesh on his fat face trembled twice, and finally looked carefully at the warrior standing in the ruins. Mr. Ethan, what are you doing? Ethan threw the cigarette in his hand to the ground, twisted it with his feet twice, and said lightly, the loss will be calculated later and reported to our company's finance department. After that, he sneered at the corner of his mouth and swept over a dozen outstanding male models. I didn't realize that you have a big appetite. Blame me for not feeding you enough. I rolled my eyes silently in my heart, and once again silently disliked his rotten cucumber. Ethan took out a bank card and threw it on the deformed table. There are 5 million in it. You guys, slap each other, whoever slaps the loudest gets the money. I glared at him. Ethan, are you sick? You are humiliating me. As soon as I finished shouting, there were louder and louder sounds behind me. Ethan's face became more sarcastic. It seems that they are happy to be humiliated by me. I turned around stiffly, and the people brought by Manager Chen had already fought with each other. Only the warrior who had contradicted Ethan was still standing aside like a gangster. It is worthy of being the one I am most satisfied with so far. Chapter 13. Ethan was not interested in watching their performance, and he pulled my arm to take me away, but was stopped by the warrior who was watching the fun. Ethan narrowed his eyes and said, recognize your identity. You are just a cheap thing for people to have fun with. Get out of here. I frowned and said dissatisfiedly, Ethan, can you not speak so harshly? I didn't expect that I would speak for others, and the strength of Ethan's hand increased. You'd better shut up and go back with me obediently. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I will do in a while. The handsome face of the warrior also sank, and there was a stormy posture. I was afraid that the two would fight, so I hurriedly shook my head at him. After all, I am still Ethan's legal wife, and according to Ethan's social status, it is easy to deal with a small male model. I don't want to cause trouble for others. Chapter 14. After leaving the club, Ethan stopped a car, threw me into the back seat, and followed me in, without saying a word. When he got home, he immediately locked the door, then took out his cell phone and called someone. Bring a few more people, smash Lin Jian for me, there is another person inside named. He looked at me, and I shook my head hurriedly. It's not that I don't want to tell him the name of the warrior, but I really don't know. I just came here to spend money, why do I care what other people's names are? You go find Manager Chen, he knows who it is, and after smashing it, find that guy and break his hand. Chapter 15. I know that Ethan has a bad temper, but he has a strong self-control ability, so I rarely see him angry, and I never thought he would be so cruel. He is innocent. Ethan, you can't do this. He stood up and pressed forward on me, his beautiful eyes were full of crooked red bloodshot. He is not innocent if he dares to think about you. Vivian, be good, don't let me hear you plead for him again. Otherwise, it may not be his hands that you want. After all, an innocent person was implicated. Chapter 16. I pushed him with both hands, but he grabbed me and pushed me to the top of my head. Did they touch you? He whispered in my ear. I kicked him with my legs, but he clamped them with his legs. I was so pressed that I ground my back molars and replied angrily, no. They don't provide this service. You can touch and touch it, but you can't get to the last step, which makes it very appetizing. He obviously knew it very well. He burst into laughter and his face looked much better. You are quite cute when you are so angry. He clamped my hands with one hand, and pinched my cheek with his free hand. The absurdity of the past 2 days is all because of your playfulness. Let's talk about it and live a good life in the future, okay? It seemed that he was coaxing the little girl out of experience, and he could do it with such a doting tone. Okay, if you break up with that college student, I'll live a good life with you. Ethan was silent for a few seconds, let go of me, sat up straight, and raked his hair irritably. You know, she can't threaten your position as Mrs. Shen. If you really don't like her, I won't let her in the future. Just appear in front of you. To put it bluntly, he just refused to give up. I nodded to show that I understood. Fortunately, I no longer like him, otherwise I would feel so painful now. Chapter 17. Ethan and I are a business marriage, and we are childhood sweethearts. I have had a crush on him for many years. After we got married, we spent more than a year of sweet days. Until one time, he was drunk and went in and out of the hotel with a female star and was photographed by paparazzi. I went back to my parents' home crying. My mother sat quietly beside me and handed me a stack of tissues after I finished crying. Vivian, love between husband and wife is a luxury for a family like ours. Of course, Mom hopes that you two will love each other deeply and be devoted to each other, but now that things have come to this, you should let it go earlier. Let it go, just a few simple words, but it took me more than a year to complete it. Chapter 18. Ethan thought he had coaxed me and wanted to touch my hair, but I dodged him. He frowned and looked unhappy again. Vivian, don't be petty, haven't you always been very sensible? At first I was sensible because I liked him, and later I was sensible because I didn't care. My personality is not so gentle, but the Song family needs a well-educated and well-behaved daughter, and the Shin family needs a well-behaved, gentle and virtuous daughter-in-law. After pretending for more than 20 years, I am really tired. I looked up at him and was about to file for divorce again when Ethan's phone rang. Perhaps he wanted to hit me. He picked up the phone and turned on the hands-free. Mr. Ethan, Lin Jian has been smashed. It's the one you asked to cripple his hand. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult to deal with. He seems to be the one that the Bai family just found, and he is also the big boss behind Lin Jian. Chapter 19. Did the Bai family just find that grandson? I think his name is Dylan. No wonder I met him near the old house last time. Last time, after Ethan left with his mistress, I sent a message to Sienna, asking her to pick me up at the old house. When I was standing by the road waiting for her, a very ordinary Volkswagen stopped next to it. The window rolled down, and a very good-looking face poked out. Where are you going? I'll take you, it seems difficult to get a taxi here. I waved my hand to refuse. My friend will be here soon. At that time, I was still wondering why someone here would drive a Volkswagen Lavita that costs less than 200,000 yuan. It's not that the car is not good, but the old house is the top wealthy area in Jincheng, and the vehicles for travel basically start at tens of millions. Later, when I saw him in Linjian, I naturally thought that he was the lover of a rich woman. Now think about it, he should have just come out of the Bai family that day. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, his identity is not simple, so Ethan can't easily touch him. The guilt that weighed on my heart was relieved a lot. Chapter 20. Ethan thought that smashing up Linjian was nothing more than a matter of paying money. He had a lot of money, and he also had status. As the heir of the old Chen family, no one would not give him 7 points of face. But the boss behind Lin Jian was the future heir of another old Chen family who had just had a feud with him. However, in just a few hours, the news that the general manager of Xingshi Group smashed up a high-end club in anger quickly became a hot search. The news also included a surveillance video of Maya wearing work clothes and throwing herself into Ethan's arms and calling her husband. Dylan personally reposted. Before this, we didn't know that Ms. Maya was Mr. Ethan's girlfriend, and there was no disrespect for Ms. Maya. I hope Mr. Ethan can give a reasonable explanation for sending people to smash up the store. It was no secret that Ethan was married. And since Maya dared to go to the old man to ask for status, she would naturally not be a low-key person. The real information and social accounts were soon exposed. All the affection she had shown in the past now became spears stabbing at her. Although the trending search was quickly removed, too many people saw it and it eventually became a big deal. Chapter 21. We were called back to the old house again. The old man sat on a chair with a cane, shaking with anger. Ethan's father stood by, patting the old man on the back to help him calm down. When he saw Ethan, his face immediately turned cold. You unfilial son, why don't you kneel down? Ethan knew he was wrong, pursed his lips and said nothing, and knelt down in front of the old man with a plop. Didn't you say last time that the bitch was just a liquor seller, and she came to Ethan because she saw that he had money? How come she is his mistress now? And the one from the Bai family, every time she comes back, she will make his grandfather stay in the hospital for a few days? That's a bastard. Why did you smash his store? It's still for that thing. The old man said, and then hit Ethan with his cane. No. Grandpa, I smashed his store because... Ethan said halfway, braked suddenly, closed his mouth tightly again, and lowered his head that had been held high. The old man knocked on him twice more until he couldn't get anything out of him, then he turned his eyes to me. Vivian, tell Grandpa, what's going on? I glanced at Ethan who was staring at the ground without saying a word, and followed his example, lowering my head and acting like an ostrich with its mouth caught by a clam shell. What should I say? Say that the cause of everything was because I was caught by your grandson when I kissed Dylan? Chapter 22. The old man was giving a lecture, and Ethan's phone kept ringing. I guess it was Maya. Her real information was exposed, and her life must be difficult. As expected, as soon as he left the old house, he immediately called back. Although his voice was still tense, he could faintly hear some tenderness. "Don't be afraid, I'll go to you now, don't cry first, just wait for me." Fortunately, I learned my lesson and drove here by myself this time, otherwise I would be left behind again. Maya is emotionally unstable now, I have to go to see her first. Ethan looked at me, hesitant to speak. I nodded, my expression calm. "Well, go ahead. I have no ill will towards the mistress. Apart from showing off to me how good Ethan is to her, she didn't do anything to hurt me substantially. The main responsibility for the cheating still lies with Ethan." Chapter 23. I didn't go home directly, but drove to the company. My brother has been managing the Song family's business for the past few years. When he knew I was going to divorce, he asked, "Have you decided? If you divorce, not to mention the trouble of dividing the property, it will also involve the cooperation between the two families. I have been taught since I was a child that the interests of the family are higher than oneself. The old Chen family is like a sturdy century-old tree, with branches extending from the main trunk. They stared at us covetously, wanting to replace us all the time. But, a lifetime is so long." I nodded. "Brother, I'm sorry." My brother was silent for a moment, patted my head, and said softly, "If you want to divorce, then divorce. Our Song family is not so dependent on the marriage of a daughter to maintain it." Chapter 24. Because of the store smashing incident, Shen's stocks fell a bit, and Maya was making a fuss again. It was a few days later that Ethan returned home. I pushed the divorce agreement in front of him. "Take a look, if there is no problem, just sign it." Ethan picked it up and threw it into the trash can. "Vivian, can you stop making trouble with me for now? I'm very tired, let me rest for a while." He tried to hug me while talking. I pushed him away and said lightly, "After so many years of marriage, when have I ever made trouble with you? If you want to sign, we will part ways amicably. If you don't sign, we will go through legal procedures." Ethan looked at me solemnly, and he probably saw that I was determined, so he panicked. "Do you have to be so decisive? Vivian, I don't want to divorce you, how about we not divorce? I broke up with her, and you said that as long as I broke up with her, we would live a good life." I shook my head. "It's too late." Chapter 25. In order to avoid divorce, Ethan moved directly into the company, but he would send me good morning and good night messages every day, share his daily life, and give me gifts for free. Maybe he copied the same trick he used to deal with Maya to me. When he shared with me the coffee he drank today, I couldn't help but reply to him, "Ethan, are you tired? You don't love me, why bother?" After the message was sent successfully, the chat dialog box finally became quiet. These days, even if I never replied to him, he could still talk to himself. The next morning, Ethan said good morning to me again on time. "I thought about it all night and found that I love you. I'm sorry, Vivian. Can you give me another chance?" "Me, don't talk too much. I feel like I'm going to get a divorce when I get home." Chapter 26. Ethan seemed to have completely realized his mistake. He even confessed to me openly under the company's official account. His action quickly attracted a barrage of criticism from netizens. "Are you trying to whitewash yourself, you cheater? Stop acting, it's disgusting to watch. Did the last time you smashed someone else's store for your mistress affect the company's revenue? So now you want to restore your image." He accepted all the criticism. Then he posted an apology with an extremely sincere attitude. Finally, he wrote, "Wrong is wrong. It's my fault for seeing my heart too late. I accept everyone's criticism and supervision. I just want to save my marriage and my lover." I felt like I was watching a farce. I asked my brother for the company's top lawyer and prepared to file for divorce. Chapter 27. The next day, Maya asked me to meet her in a coffee shop. She didn't know how long she had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she felt like she could hardly open them. Her pretty face was dull, her lips were dry and flaky, and even her voice was hoarse. "Can you give Ethan back to me? I really like him, I beg you." Although I also think she looks a bit pitiful now, it has nothing to do with me. A mistress asked the legal wife to give her husband back to her? "You shouldn't come to me." She blinked, and tears began to fall down. "I really have no choice. He broke up with me. I went to find him, but he refused to see me. Please, help me, I can't live without him." I stood up and looked down at her. "I'm sorry, I can't help you, we are going to divorce." Seeing the light bursting out of her red and swollen eyes, I hooked my lips and turned away. The little girl is still dreaming of flying to the branches. I wish her success. Chapter 28. When I got home, I saw Ethan in the living room. I raised my eyebrows. "Why? You came back to divorce me?" He was a little reserved. "No, Assistant Lee said there is a very popular movie recently, and he has bought the tickets for us. You want to date me?" "No need. The only thing I can talk to you about right now is divorce. I've already contacted a lawyer. If you don't sign, we'll meet in court in a couple of days." Ethan sat in the shadows, his expression difficult to discern. After a long while, he asked, do we have to leave? Right, then, give me another month. I remember we haven't had our honeymoon yet. I felt my eyebrows were almost wrinkled into knots. Is it necessary? He said firmly, yes, after a month, I will take the initiative to sign. Even if we go through the procedures, it should take several years if I don't agree, right? It seems that this is indeed the best way so far. Seeing my hesitation, he continued, I can make concessions on the division of property, but for this month, we have to live like normal couples. As he spoke, his voice was a little bitter, just think of it as making up for our honeymoon. The concession on property added weight to this negotiation. I gritted my teeth, okay. But there can't be any physical contact. If you agree, draw up an agreement for me tomorrow. Chapter 29. Ethan did make a big concession. On top of the property division I made, he gave me 2 more office buildings, 3 more shops, and even 5% of Shingshure's shares. You know, he only has 20% in his hands. After the division of property was settled, Ethan began to make travel plans for this month, excited like a pure boy who had just fallen in love. He asked me, Vivian, let's go to the amusement park. Or to the beach. I half leaned on the sofa, poking at the casual game on my phone, and said casually, don't you have to work? Everything has been arranged. If there is an emergency, Special Assistant Lee will contact me. This is the guide I made. Take a look at where you want to go. He handed me a piece of paper full of words, looking at me with bright eyes, expectant and nervous. 2 people who are about to divorce are pretending to have a pure love here, thinking that as long as I persist for a month, I can successfully divorce and get a lot of property. I silently endured it. I pointed casually, let's go here. Chapter 30. I mean the biggest mall. I don't know when Ethan bought a couple's outfit, and he blushed and asked me to change into it. I repeated it 10 times in my mind, divorce, property, and endured it again. We went to eat the so-called couple's hot pot, and then went to catch dolls. I was holding a bunch of plush dolls and preparing to change to play in the secret room, but when I turned around, I bumped into a broad embrace. Be careful. I looked up and met Dylan's eyes. After knowing his identity, I recalled Meng Lang sitting on his lap and hugging him to chew, and it was inevitable that I would feel embarrassed. Ethan quickly pulled me out of Dylan's arms and hid behind him. Even if I didn't look, I could feel the tension between the 2 people. Dylan spoke first, with a hint of sarcasm, Mr. Ethan is really amazing, with 2 women at home and outside. Ethan's back was tense, and his voice was a bit sharp, Mr. Dylan, just take care of yourself, don't get involved in other people's housework. Mr. Dylan seems to have forgotten what I said, don't think about things that don't belong to you. Really? Dylan chuckled, it's not the end yet, who can say for sure who it belongs to? Don't you think so, Mr. Ethan? I haven't thanked Mr. Ethan for his generosity yet. I was thinking about redecorating Linjian recently, and I was worried about the expenses, and Mr. Ethan took the initiative to send money. Chapter 31. Because of Dylan, Ethan lost interest in playing, so we simply went home early. That Dylan is obviously not a good person. Vivian, stay away from him in the future. Indeed, the Dylan today is completely different from the warrior in Linjian. Although I agree with him in my heart, I don't want to respond. Ethan glanced at me secretly and changed the subject. Why don't we go to Provence or Maldives in a few days? These 2 days, he talked to me cautiously and with a bit of flattery, as if he was afraid of making me angry. I said I had no objection, whatever. Anyway, it's only a month, I can bear it. Chapter 32. We didn't end up going to Provence or the Maldives. Because Maya was pregnant, she posted a pregnancy test report. Baby, Dad doesn't want us anymore, but it doesn't matter, you still have Mom, who will take good care of you. This news was like a heavy bomb, instantly blowing Ethan to pieces. The official corporate account of Shingshure and his own personal account were drowned in abuse. Didn't you love her so passionately that you would even smash the store for her? Why did you kick her out as soon as she got pregnant? Bah! Scumbag! Divorce her quickly. Let's let our beautiful girl go. What, love or not, your own interests are the most important. So disgusting, he confessed to his wife 2 days ago and asked us to supervise him. How dare he do that? Boycott all Shingshure products, starting with me. Divorce. 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 They even dug out my private account and came to comfort me. I feel sorry for my beautiful sister. Divorce him. Please. Scumbag is not worth it. Don't believe what he said about loving you, it's all fake. If he loves you, he won't cheat. Chapter 33. Divorce seems to be no longer a matter between the 2 of us. Shingshure's stock price shrank rapidly, losing 120 million in one night. On the contrary, the Song family, perhaps out of pity for me as the original wife, began to buy the products produced by the Song family crazily. Even when the Song family officials advised rational consumption, they forced marriage again, but they forced divorce. Don't care whether we are rational or not, let the beautiful woman divorce, we can still continue to buy. We will give you money to file a divorce lawsuit with the scumbag. Go and bring your eldest daughter back. If the money is not enough, we will continue to send. In the end, Ethan signed the divorce agreement before a month. Vivian, after I deal with all this, can I still pursue you? I refused without any hesitation. Forget it, let's keep some dignity for each other. He turned his head, and drops of water fell from the corners of his eyes. Chapter 34. After my divorce, I packed my bags and left the country, ready to travel around the world. My brother sent me to the airport. Before entering the security check, he patted my shoulder. Vivian, brother hopes you can be yourself and not be bound anymore. My eyes were wet and I choked up and said yes. After traveling through one country after another, my skin became much darker, but I was very happy. I can run recklessly, laugh without caring about my image, eat potato chips and watch TV series while lying in bed, and even run to a roadside stall with a messy hair and slippers to buy snacks, and then sit next to it and enjoy them. Now, I am not the Miss Song who must follow the rules, nor the Mrs. Shin who must be virtuous and considerate. I am Song Vivian, and freedom is great. I have seen Ethan many times, on the streets of London, on the swaying boats in Venice. He looked at me from a distance, and as long as he didn't disturb me, I would let him do it. Chapter 35. I heard that he was having a hard time because of Maya's incident. The old man and the more prestigious older generations of the Shin family were very disappointed in him. Those shareholders even suggested that an excellent person be selected from below to replace him. Ethan said nothing, but just cleaned up the mess. It is very important for a big family to have offspring. Even if the child is raised outside, he will be born. After all, it is not too expensive to raise an illegitimate child. He may be useful in the future, but Maya's child could not be saved. At 16 weeks of pregnancy, Ethan took her to do amniocentesis. If it is his, he will abort it. If it is not his, it has nothing to do with him. I don't know whether it is fortunate or unfortunate that the child is not his. Maybe her hope of marrying into a wealthy family was shattered. Maya finally did not keep the child. Later, Ethan withdrew from the power center of the Shin family. He said, I want to walk the path she has walked. Then let him go. Everything has nothing to do with me. Chapter 36. I was sitting on the Scottish coastline watching the sunset when I met Dylan. He walked to me and sat down beside me naturally. Vivian, do you want to try with me? I tilted my head to look at him. What? Marriage? Then let's not do it. I have good looks and money, and I can live well on my own. Why do I have to put myself in the cage of marriage again? He stroked his chin and thought for a while. You can use my money to support a male model. This is a very open-minded person. I squinted and smiled. No need, I think I can't spend all the property my ex-husband gave me in my lifetime, not to mention that I have the Song family behind me. Only ghosts would just climb out of the dragon's den and then fall into the tiger's den. Ethan and Dylan are both heirs chosen by their own families. Who is more innocent? Then again, marriage is not necessary. Who can say that a person who is free is destined to be unhappy? The sunset dyed the sunset glow on the horizon red, and the reflection rippled on the sea. The sea breeze blew on my face. Everything is the best choice.